and then tell me that you want tax relief if you're against this. It doesn't make sense. The data doesn't show it. We have to go upstream. We have to address these needs with alternatives to get to the roots of these issues in these schools. And if the school districts really opposed it, they would have showed up. None showed up, no opposition. The committee voted it out 8-0 or 7-1 or whatever. If there was true opposition to this, they would have showed up, but there isn't. And if there was, it's because they would be embarrassed to stand up in front of a committee and say, I want to oppose this bill because I believe in suspending 5-year-olds. And if that's the case, I would encourage each district to write a statement and say, I want to suspend 5-year-olds. We would like to suspend 5-year-olds because we can't find a way to figure out alternatives and figure out how to address the needs of our students. And that is a problem, fundamentally a problem. Why do we have an education community if the education community can't find a way to educate our kids and meet their needs, but they would like $1 billion this year because we need to fund education? What is the purpose of it if you're not going to try to address the needs of our students? We have to find alternatives to suspension. We have to find alternatives to detention. We have to find alternatives to prisons. It is a problem. It's not even fiscally responsible to keep investing into this type of stuff. But opposing policies like this means that you are voting to not be fiscally responsible in the future, because our state is going to continue to invest in juvenile justice, which is a failing system, a child welfare system that is failing, and an adult prison population that is failing. That doesn't make sense. This is, to me, smart policy for the whole state to say, hey, let's go upstream. Let's find alternatives so we don't need to come back in 20, 30 years or 15 years and propose new YRTCs, another NCYF or something like that. Why can't we invest in these kids? Why can't we take these dollars that we're proposing for these prisons and these detention centers and invest in these kids? Because that's the problem. We haven't invested in these communities, and the districts haven't stepped up and looked at alternatives to help these kids and these families. It's just, oh, we can't do it. Oh, we not enough teachers or those type of things. Solve the problem. Be leaders. What is the purpose of your job if you can't step up and be a leader and meet the needs of our kids? And your fallback is, I still want to suspend 5-year-olds. That should be an indictment on the whole system. That our default is, let's suspend 5-year-olds. That is embarrassing as a state. Then we stand up and say we care about kids and want to see kids be successful in education and these type of things, but we want to oppose a bill that will prevent you from suspending 5-year-olds. You got to be ashamed of yourself.
Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would yield my time to Senator McKinney if you'd like it.
Senator McKinney, 4:50.
Sure, thank you. Again, you should be ashamed of yourself if you think it's cool to suspend pre-K students, kindergarten students, first grade students, second grade students. Because when you truly look at the numbers, the drop-off happens after that. That's when the education decline happens after second grade, especially for Black kids. And a huge part of that reason is because we represent a huge population of the kids that are being suspended, because the district hasn't stepped up and done its job to address the needs of the kids. The state hasn't stepped up and addressed the need of those communities. It is really, really annoying and frustrating. I walked in here today. I was in a good mood. I haven't been in a good mood for the past month for a lot of reasons. And for whatever reason, I woke up kind of feeling okay. Then we get here today and it's back to, I'm frustrated, annoyed. We got a prison on the table. Now I have to stand up and argue with people about why pre-K students should be suspended. This is 2023. This is what it's like in America, having these type of debates. But then we hear conversations about we need to fund education and we need to support our schools and we need all these things. What for? So you can spend 5-year-olds? Put $1 billion in no investment in alternatives and prevention to suspension. But we want to build a prison, but nobody wants to close that pipeline. That's why I don't support it. It's things like this that frame my perspective and my position on a lot of things. Because if people truly cared about these kids, we would be suspending them. We would be investing in their families, investing in their education, making sure that when they went to school, they weren't acting out. Maybe some of them might have a behavioral health issue that's not addressed, but it's not getting addressed because the school is deeming them just as a bad kid. I was deemed as a bad kid. I was suspended a lot in elementary, from pre-K up until I got to junior high school, honestly. I don't think I got suspended in high school, and I spent junior high mostly in-school suspension, looking at a cubicle doing packets all day. Honestly speaking, if they opposed this bill, they would have showed up. But they probably did oppose it, but it might have been super embarrassing for them to sit in front of a committee hearing, read a testimony and say, hey, we oppose this bill because we can't do our jobs and we want to suspend 5-year-olds. And that's what it is. And people could disagree with me all they want, but that's the truth. We can't be in the business of continuing the school to prison pipeline, proposing new prisons that's going to be overcrowded day one, so you have to build another one. There's low will to do any policy changes around criminal justice in this place. I just don't get what we're doing here. It makes no sense to me. And I'll stand up all day if I have to and fight for this, because I fundamentally don't think we should be suspending pre-K students, first grade students, kindergartners, and second graders. The numbers show the decline in the education outcomes after the second grade. And I would argue a huge part of that reason is that we're suspending kids in pre-K. Kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. We should be looking at alternatives to education. Our education system needs to be modernized in the first place. But opposing this is wrong, honestly. And there's nobody that can convince me that there's any justification for it. Thank you.
Senator Walz, you're recognized. This is your last opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm standing up I just wanted to get a couple clarifications on a couple of the amendments that's in the package. First of all, AM 1503, and I want to be clear that I think Boy Scouts of America and Girl Scouts are great organizations and that they are committed to supporting our kids. However, as a past educator, I did have a concern about the time that I had during the year to get through everything that I needed to get through with my students, all the curriculum. It's already a hard push to get through things, and when you have a student that is not grasping a certain part of a lesson, if you're like me, you don't move ahead. You move together as a class and you wait until that kid understands and grasp that concept as much as possible. So it does take up a lot of time. It is a rush to get through, everything that we need to get through. So again, I just wanted to make a clarification, and I'm hoping that Senator Von Gilleren would yield to a question, please.
Senator Von Gilleren, will you yield?
Of course.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Oh, and I don't have my information in front of me, but it says in your amendment that the school, I don't know exactly how it reads, but it will make every effort to provide time for Boy Scouts to come in and talk with kids in school. I just want to make sure that it is not your intention to interrupt class time. As a teacher, not your intention to do that.
Yeah, thank you for asking for that clarification. And actually, it's very specific that it will be during non-curriculum time. And we worked with Colby Coash and his group on that to make sure. In fact, forgive me, I don't remember the exact. Non-instructional and non-curriculum were two different things, and I didn't understand that until we had that conversation, but they were very specific about that. So yes, any contact, any meetings, any presentations would be during non-instructional time. And I just want to clarify that kids and parents can opt out of that presentation if they choose to. So no one's forcing anything down anybody's throat there. So thank you for the question.
Okay, can you just quickly give a couple examples of non-instructional time then?
So that would be before or after school. And again, there was some lack of clarity on this, probably more on my part than anybody's, about, we know that kids have a very limited amount of time for lunchtime. So we said that we did not want to encroach on lunch or recess or anything else. It's also very specific in the bill that it must be a mutually agreed upon time. So if the school district said we absolutely will not do this during recess or will not do it during lunchtime, here's the time that you have available. The groups have to work with the schools. Each individual school district has a latitude to do that on their own and determine what those times are. So they must work with them, and it's at their discretion, really at the school district's discretion, to tell these groups when they can come in and make the presentation that works best for them and does not consume any instructional time.
All right, thank you, Senator Van Gilleren.
Thank you.
Quickly, I also wanted to talk about a program that we have not discussed yet, and it is really a great program. I'm very excited about this. It's the Professional to Teacher program, and this program provides services and supports to assist paraeducators to obtain a teaching certificate, creating and providing $1 million to the Paraprofessionals Teacher Program. Colleagues, this is a great program. I believe this is going to be the quickest way to fill vacancies in teaching positions with people who already have teaching or experience in the classroom. They know and understand how to manage a classroom, which, I think is, again, probably the best program that we have in this package today. And I think it's going to be easy to fill those positions. Senator Linehan just talked about being at out west, and she visited a school, and they talked about they had 164 people in this program, or that would be eligible for this program. So I was pretty excited about that. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Blood, you are recognized. This is your last opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I still stand in support of the underlying bill and opposed to AM 1503. I do agree with Senator Linehan, who said that we shouldn't be able to pick and choose who gets to come to the school. That is exactly what this bill does. We are picking and choosing 6 organizations, I believe, and saying that they have priority over other organizations. The question that I have is that if Title 36 is not important, why is it not taken out of the bill? Because I think that that creates the biggest hurdle that we have with this bill. I never named any one organization of the sexual assault accusations. I just said one of the organizations. And I'm really puzzled by the comments that were on the mic about sexual assault. But I will clarify that, yes, sex abuse is a problem for our children here in Nebraska and across the United States. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 10 boys are affected throughout their lifetimes when it comes to sexual abuse or sexual assault. And I don't think it's any one organization. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying that I think some organizations are better at covering it up, allowing more children to be sexually abused. And that's my concern, is that we don't get to pick and choose who we like and we don't like. That is the job of the parents. So I want to be really clear what my issues are, because we're kind of going off into the weeds. People are kind of cherry picking some of the things I'm saying. Number one, schools don't need forced access for a limited few, period. They don't need forced access. If they want to let organization in or not let organizations in, that's their choice. We have school districts that let nobody in, and that's okay. Parents support their local schools with their property taxes, and they can have these discussions with their schools if they want to let certain organizations in or not in. That is not our job. We are overstepping our job. If you are unhappy, as you've stated on the mic, Senator Von Gillern, with a child's behavior, your parents are the first teachers. If you're worried about their behavior, if you're worried about what the parents are doing when they raise their children, then let's make sure we're putting more money into mental health, not just tossing the few dollars we've done this year. Push for affordable pre-K. Have better post-delivery services after a woman gives birth to their child and is struggling. Quit incarcerating family members from our Black and brown communities at a higher rate than others and breaking up our families in Nebraska. There are so many more things that you can do that are so much more important than letting a few organizations that you favor into our schools. And again, I was a Boy Scout leader. I was a Girl Scout leader. I don't have anything against these organizations. I have a huge problem with the fact that you get to pick what organizations that you like and don't like and give them preference. It is not necessary. It is not needed. It almost looks like you're trying to punish a certain school system based on this bill and the bill that Senator Sanders had. The Hal Dobb, actually, I still remember, came and testified in support of, and there was a lot of angry voices at that time, like it was very pressing that it had to be done. And so something's up, and my gut tells me that there's more to this story. If we go into Title 36, there's a lot of other organizations if you want to use that as your foundation. What about the Civil Air Patrol? What about the Frederick Douglass Memorial and Historical Association, the National Academy of Sciences, National Federation of Music Clubs, National Fund for Medical Education, National Safety Council, teaching our children how not to drown when they swim. There's so many other organizations that are just as worthy that we could use under Title 36. But here's the thing. We don't need state statute to tell schools who they choose to let in and not let in. Most schools are carte blanche. Either they let you in, and it pertains to all organizations, or they don't let you in. But I guarantee when we start having preferences, you may be told by the Attorney General that this is indeed constitutional, but you are going to have organizations, the ones that you don't want in your schools, start taking us to court. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Duncan, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise again, still in favor of LB 705. I just wanted to take another moment to touch on what Senator McKinney had been talking about, as I think it's important for us to have this larger conversation, again, about the school-to-prison pipeline and what we hear about all the time with regards to the way that we exercise discipline in schools and how it can eventually down the road negatively impact juveniles and adults ultimately. One thing that this package doesn't have in it, which I don't fault anybody for that, obviously these Christmas trees get large enough that at a certain point some things don't make the cut, but one thing that I would really appreciate us to focus on moving forward in other sessions is the issue of how truancy is ultimately adjudicated with youth. What I mean by that is here in Nebraska, if a juvenile or if a student hits a certain threshold of days that they've missed in school, they can actually get referred to the county attorney for a truancy charge. Without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, a truancy charge is treated differently than a law violation, but ultimately, if you are adjudicated, which is the way in juvenile court of saying found guilty, if you are found guilty of having been habitually truant, you get placed in the juvenile justice system the same way that you would if you were guilty of a law violation. In Nebraska, the only penalty if you are found responsible or guilty of something in the juvenile justice system is being placed on probation. And what we see repeatedly are youth who are struggling with issues at home, substance abuse disorders, mental health, trauma, special ed issues that aren't being effectively addressed, who are perhaps missing school or being taken out of school by their parents, hitting this threshold and then being referred to the county attorney and then getting involved in the juvenile justice system. What we also know is that studies show us that involvement in the juvenile justice system is one of the biggest predictors of being involved in the criminal justice system as an adult. And the second that you get involved in juvenile probation, the likelihood for your recidivism, both as a juvenile and as an adult, increases. And taking that even a step further, one of the issues that I've personally seen, and I talk to juvenile attorneys who represent kids on these truancy charges, what they see are kids with legitimate issues ultimately being placed on probation for being truant. That probation that they're on is only maybe for a certain period of time, but then that youth is under a microscope. And being under a microscope when you're 13, 14, I don't know about a lot of other folks in this body, but you do things maybe that aren't perfect. But when you're 13 or 14, if you mess up on probation, then that probation gets extended. And then you're under even a closer microscope. And let's say you don't make your curfew one night because you're out with your friends. Next thing you know, your probation's being revoked and they're sending out referrals to send you out of home. And then you go to an out-of-home placement. Now you've been removed from your school, you've been removed from your family, you've been removed from your support network, and you start to do even worse. And let's say you get placed at some out-of-home placement and you begin to act out because you're upset about that. Your probation gets revoked again. You get kicked out of that out-of-home placement. Maybe you test positive on a drug test, something, or alcohol. And then next thing you know, you're getting taken out of that out-of-home placement and you're looking at the Youth Rehabilitation and Treatment Center or something to that effect. Now, I'm not trying to be overly alarmist about it. That doesn't happen all the time. But I can stand here today and tell you that I have seen cases where people are adjudicated on truancy who ultimately remain in the juvenile probation system for years, because they are then under that microscope and we're no longer actually trying to address the underlying issue of truancy. And so I think that our state has done a really good job of trying to address that problem. I know that county attorneys here in Lancaster County in particular have done a very, I think, good job of creating things like, thank you, Mr. President, things like truancy diversion programs where rather than send these youth into the juvenile justice system, they work within the school to try to address the underlying problems. And that's fantastic because what we should be saying is if there's a problem that's causing youth to not be able to go to school, whether it's they have to work jobs or whether it's that they have mental health issues or substance abuse issues, we should be addressing the underlying problems and not simply putting them in this system that we know is ultimately maybe not best equipped to address the underlying problems of truancy. So again, I still rise in favor of LB 705. Really appreciate the conversation that Senator McKinney's been having with regard to punishment and the potential for the school to prison pipeline. And I wanted to highlight the issue of truancy moving forward because it's something that I intend to continue to address. And I hope my colleagues will listen as those bills come up in the legislature over the next few sessions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Von Gillern, you are recognized. This is your last opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, eventually we're going to get to these amendments. I apologize for being out of order. I'm speaking again on AM 1503, which will be attached to AM 1468, a committee amendment, and all, of course, under 705. I just want to address a few comments that have been made by Senator Blood, and I believe that something good should always come from something bad. Abuse of children is a horrible and deplorable crime, and it's a shame that it happens in any organization. And whether that's scouts, churches, Little League, public or private schools, or the one that I'm most personally familiar with, a youth basketball league decades ago in Omaha that was facilitated by a pediatrician. That's had a decades-long impact on a family member of mine that I've had a front row seat to see the impact for 60 years. I'm not insensitive to the topic, and I would never promote a group that does not do all that they can to protect children. Any implication that I'm personally in promoting any group that would allow or promote child abuse or not stand against it is a deplorable and inaccurate accusation. Boy Scouts of America today has one of the best child protection training programs that exists in any youth-serving organization. And unfortunately, that came out of the tragedy of past abuses. It requires any volunteer to take their training, which takes several hours to complete and must be repeated every several years. As a former board member, I've taken the training twice and I've learned more each time. and it's changed my behavior around kids. It's taught me to make sure that any activities with a child involves more than one child and more than one adult to be present, and ensuring that there are safe environments for activities. Boy Scouts has made this training available to other organizations who have picked up on that and are utilizing their thoughtfully developed program to protect kids, not only in the United States, but around the world. Back to the bill, a few clarifications I want to reiterate are: schools and organizations must agree on a mutually agreeable date and time to make a presentation. Any presentation must be made during non-curriculum time. Point that Senator Walls asked about, and I'm thankful for that question. Schools may lump presentations into a group. For example, you could have 2, 3, or all 6 groups make their presentation at one time, making even the time more efficient. Kids or parents can opt out of any presentation. Nothing is forced on anyone. And an important point to what I just spoke about, background checks are required by anyone who represents any of these organizations at their own cost. Senator Blood said we're picking and choosing winners for school access. I prefer to believe that we are pre-vetting organizations in a way that will protect kids and grow them. Senator Blood also said we should put more money into mental health and other programs. Well, as I spoke earlier, the programs that are being made available that I'm speaking of are free. I don't know why we can't understand that. To say that we should come up with a government program that will do all the work at half the efficiency and twice the cost, and that the government bears all the cost of that, I don't see the sense in that. I do agree, Senator Blood, with your comment that parents are and should be the primary trainers of children, but we've handed off many of those duties to schools already. When I was a kid, you learned about sex education at home, and today it's taught primarily by the schools. I'm not saying that's wrong, not saying it's right, but that's the reality. So to say that we have not forfeited some traditionally parental duties and training to schools already or other organizations would not be true. I also know that when I was raising kids, and we had 4 kids in 4 years, so it was hectic, I was more than happy to have other parents, teachers, or groups around to assist in that effort to make certain that our children would reach their greatest potential. Some kids will never hear about these opportunities unless these presentations are made in schools. Let's not cheat them out of that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized, and this is your last opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield my time to Senator Linehan.
Senator Linehan, 4 minutes 50.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator McDonald. I'm going to go back through and just kind of highlight some of the other things that are in this bill that maybe in another session might have been consent calendar. But one of the bills that I think is very important is Senator Merman's homeschool. So allow children who are homeschooled who want to play sports with their home team district are allowed to do so. Now there's an agreement with, this is not my expertise, but the associations, but we have some schools who aren't following that. So now a child will be able to take one class, let's say it's a chemistry class, and still be able to participate in sports instead of having to take 2 classes. The problem with having to take 2 classes, if one of those classes is 9 a.m., the student has to go at 9 a.m., and the other class is at 2 p.m., it's like 3 or 4 trips back and forth between school. And if there's more than one child in the homeschooling situation, many of you are parents, you know how that works. Get in the car, get out of the car, it burns up a lot of time. The other bill that I want to make sure that I speak to is Senator Conrad's on the IEPs and giving reasons for children why they won't accept him. I understand that the schools have to have the ability to say no on I'm sorry, I said IEP, and what I meant was the Senator Conrad's here. Senator Conrad, can I ask you a question?
Senator Conrad, will you yield to a question?
Yes, of course.
I'm tripping on your bill here. Can you explain your bill that's in this? Wouldn't schools still have the right to say we can't take this child, right?
Yes, that's right, Senator Linehan. It wouldn't change the parameters of the existing option enrollment program, except really in 2 key ways. The first being that rather than assessing any sort of blanket denial for option enrollment, it requires the schools, especially when a kid has special needs, to do a case-by-case analysis and then to provide that information to the parents and provide us with a report about how that's happening statewide. So those are really kind of the key components, but it doesn't throw out the option enrollment program and completely rewrite it. It's a pretty modest reform to really get after those key issues.
Because you're a parent, right?
That's right. Yes. Yes.
And when you're struggling and you're trying to find the best place for your student, you need all the help you can get, right?
Oh, there is no doubt about that, Senator. It takes a village, and you know that from your family. And I reaffirm that with resources, with energy, there is always a need for more help, whether that's partners in schools, in community, in government, to try and help us figure things out when we're trying to get the best course of action for our kids.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. I appreciate that. Another part of the bill is LB 648, which was Senator McDonald's. And it is, and this, I think, I don't know if we've talked this morning. Senator McDonald, could you yield for a question?
Senator McDonald, will you yield?
Yes.
Your LB 648, it says here in my notes, it creates a high school equivalency grant fund and appropriates $750,000 from the general fund to provide assistance to institutions that offer high school equivalency programs and expanding services and programs. And I remember from the hearing, you had a lot of
1 minute.
statistics. Can you explain that program a little bit and why it's so important?
Yes, but as I mentioned earlier, and thank you, Senator Linehan, for the question, is that other states have worked on the Workforce Diploma Act, and the idea of going through an equivalency program, which is quite a bit of time commitment, we added to it. We looked at the idea of having those soft skills and a technical skill. And for example, I've used a person decides they're short on math, they quit as a senior, and they want to be a welder. Well, and we brought this bill a few years ago, and we worked with the community colleges to be able to run the bill through the idea of the training, and they could potentially contract out. But it's trying to get those people ready with that equivalency part, but also with those soft skills and a technical skill to enter the workforce. We know we have 90,000 plus, 70,000 plus now, up to 90,000 potential openings for these middle skill workers. And we believe that we have over 100,000 adults right now in the state of Nebraska.
Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you are recognized to speak. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I need to introduce some students. Senator Bohr would like to recognize 70 fourth grade students from Laura Dodge Elementary in Omaha. Students, you're seated in the north balcony. If you would rise and be welcomed by the Nebraska Legislature. Now, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. If Senator McDonald wants the remainder of my time, I'm happy to let him finish his thoughts.
Senator McDonald?
Yes, thank you.
4 minutes 50.
So if you look at right now in the state of Nebraska with adults without a high school diploma or equivalency, we have over 100,000. And for the idea of looking at and working on LB 648, again, mentioning those numbers of 70 plus thousand up to 90,000 potential job openings, it's a great opportunity for us to take those individuals and give them an opportunity to improve their earning capacity and help provide for their families, and at the same time help us as a workforce. With the other states that have tried this, we know statistically that it is working. Years ago when we first brought it, they said it was unconstitutional because we were looking at paying directly to that individual. For example, the individual is teaching someone math and getting them ready for their equivalency test on their GED, or someone's teaching welding. And the money would be going directly from the state to that individual if that person passes. So we wanted to make sure everyone had skin in the game, that if Mike needs help with math and Mike goes ahead and takes the math test and does not pass that portion, then that individual that was teaching the math is not going to get paid. We found out that was unconstitutional, so we reached out to the community colleges, and with the help of the community colleges, they said we can run the programs through us. And that's how we're doing it now. That doesn't mean the community colleges can't contract out to individuals to help these people get ready for their testing, but they will be, as they go through the process, they will be awarded the finances. And something about the fiscal note got somewhat confusing because we had a zero fiscal note. Well, that was because over the years, the money had been sitting in the equivalency program. And when we came upon it, we said, well, let's use this for going forward for the Workforce Diploma Act and make sure that money's out there helping the citizens that was originally attended years ago based on the finances. And that's why it had a zero fiscal note. Will Senator Linehan have would you yield for a question?
Senator Linehan, will you yield?
Certainly.
Is that enough information? And did you want to ask me any other questions about?
No, I think that was perfect. You did an excellent job with your bill. Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator McDonald.
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, Senator Holland would move to recess the body until 1:00 p.m.
Senators, you've heard the motion to recess. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. We are recessed to 1:00. Thank you.